No one knows exactly when the first glass of wine was raised in France, but we can be pretty certain wine has been part of the French dinner table for more than 2,000 years.
France is a place that has as much or more history and culture of winemaking than any place in the world. Greeks traded wine here in trading post 6th century BC. Romans planted vines everywhere.
By the time Roman armies reached northern France, vineyards were already being grown in many of the places that would become synonymous with wine. But despite more than 2 millennia of winemaking traditions, French wine remains a vast and confusing field for most of us.
Particularly in a restaurant, I think people don't, if there's a large selection, people have very little idea of how to choose.
There's so much of a selection, but it's hard to really know all the varieties and good vintages and things like that.
I guess all of it confuses me. Yeah.
French wines are confusing, especially if you don't speak French. But ask most consumers where the best wine comes from, and the answer is as clear as the glass in your hand.
Most of them, I think, will say, well, France, I think. France has the image of producing the wines, the world's best wines. And then you say, well, do you buy French wines? No, I don't buy them. You ask, well, why don't you buy them? One, they're too expensive. I don't understand them, and I can't pronounce them.
The truth is, you don't need to speak French to enjoy the wines of France. But it's important to learn what makes France different from other wine-producing regions, especially New World producers like California. American winemaker David Pearson did more than just learn the language of France. After graduating from California's UC Davis, he moved here to discover its wine.
I remember very well being in the Loire Valley and having the opportunity to go up to small vineyard growers, small wine growers, and I would knock on their door, and I was 22 at the time, something like that. And I'd say, hello, I'm from UC Davis, I just graduated, I'd like to talk with you about wine. And they were first sort of skeptical, and then they would say, well, all right, we'll talk about wine. And we'd sit down, and I would think of the only question I could think of, which was at the time a very hot topic, was how do you induce and control malolactic fermentation? So I asked him that question. The guy would look at me and say, well, what's malolactic fermentation? How can you not? And it was immediate missing of world. He didn't know what malolactic fermentation was. And then I explained it to him, and he'd say, well, in the spring I take the barrels up, ferment a second time, and I take the barrels back down into the cellar. And through that process, I learned that these growers had an intuitive sense. They knew the wine and understood the wine in a way that I didn't at that time at all.
Because the French have been making wine for a long time. They have had centuries to figure out which grapes to plant, where to plant them, and how to make their wine. All that trial and error means winemakers here know their soil as well as they know their wines. France's ability to grow grapes and make good wine is hardwired into the land and the people who live here. They even have a word for this connection between soil, grower, and vineyard. It's a concept they call terroir.
Terroir is the basis of French quality winemaking, and it remains in English the untranslatable word. Terroir, meaning in our sense of it, the unique combination of a site, the soil, the climate around it, and the varietal that's planted on that site that produces a unique wine, and appreciation of the combination of those elements that end up in the final product.
Terroir literally means soil, but there's more to it than just dirt. Rainfall and sunlight are also part of a vineyard's terroir. Geography plays a role too. Nearby hills and forests, even lakes and rivers, all play an important role in the growth of a vineyard. These microclimates, combined with variations in soil property, can produce a terroir that varies from region to region and even from vineyard to vineyard.
Terroir is all of those factors that affect the growing of that grapevine. So it's partly the climate, it's the soil, it's the, say if it's on a hillside, the aspect in relationship to the sun. If it's growing near a tree, if it provides shade, if it's up against a wall that radiates heat, all of those things are going to affect the outcome of how that grape ripens and what it tastes like.
French winemakers believe their wines are so exceptional because their terroir is so unique. And after years of deciding which grapes to grow and where to plant them, the French have learned that winemaking begins in the vineyard.
In this French technical book, they had the drawings of the different soil types. And to describe the quality of wine or the quality of the terroir of each of these sites, rather than describing the chemical components,